Iceland is sitting much higher than usual in the odds to win Eurovision. At the time of recording this video, they're trading spots with Italy in the 3rd to 4th area, and they're only behind Croatia and Ukraine. Now, the entry itself isn't chosen yet, but there's one person that's in the running to represent Iceland that very quickly became the focus of attention because of who he is and what's going on in the world right now. And so we're doing a selection review today, but it's going to be a little bit different than what we normally do because we're going to be focusing a lot on this entry that's creating all this buzz. Let's talk about Songvakeppnin 2024. Bashar Murad is technically making his debut at a Eurovision national selection, but he won't be a stranger to everyone. Some people would recognize him for collaborating with Hera, who represented Iceland in 2019. That year, Eurovision was held in Tel Aviv, and they were the only participating act that openly condemned Israel's occupation of Palestine. During the grand final, they also displayed Palestinian flags during the voting sequence, which later resulted in RÚV, Iceland's broadcaster, being fined for violating Eurovision's rules around political messaging. Shortly after the show, they released Klefi Samet, which features lyrics in Icelandic and Arabic and talks about echo chambers, limitations of freedoms, and being steadfast in the face of injustice. So that's how Bashar was first introduced to Eurovision circles. Fast forward to this year when the competing artists for Songvakeppnin are announced, and he immediately became the main focus of discussion. The reasons are quite obvious. He's Palestinian, and Israel, Palestine, and other areas of the Middle East have been engulfed in violence since October. Some people considered the timing of that to be suspicious, and that his inclusion in the lineup was for political purposes. There were two things that he pointed out in response to that. He said that he was planning on participating in Eurovision since the year before, and that work on this track had started in August. It's also been pointed out that the submission deadline for Songvakeppnin was the 10th of September, which was a full month before the news cycle became focused on Israel-Palestine. Now, as far as I can see, there aren't any real reasons to doubt any of that to be true. Others disagree. But I think that regardless of what the intentions are here, something needs to be emphasized. This would have happened regardless of what's going on in the world right now, simply because he's Palestinian. To this day, people deny that Palestinians exist and that Palestine exists. And so there's no way around it for him or any other Palestinian artist who would want to compete in an event where Israel participates as a nation. He's also justified his participation by reminding people that he's working with an Icelandic team, including Einar and Matthias of Hera, who are credited on the song. He shouldn't have to, because neither the EBU or RÚV require him to be Icelandic in order to represent Iceland, but he likely feels the need to because of these assumptions, the idea that he's there to cause trouble rather than share his music. So with that acknowledged, let's talk about the song that he's competing with and the messaging behind it.
'Cause I'm going in the wild, wild west, where the only rest is for the wicked. Or even if you do your best and you pass that test, doesn't mean you'll make it.
Musically speaking, this isn't the kind of song that's screaming for attention. It has a laid-back beat, it puts a lot of emphasis on the bass line and humming, and the storytelling is a big part of its appeal. We see him play up to this idea of the Wild West by using tropes and aesthetics from Western films. But the Wild West that he's talking about has nothing to do with cowboys, horses, tumbleweed, whatever comes to mind for you. He's talking about the West, aka the Western world. And when he says things like, where even if you do your best and pass that test doesn't mean you'll make it, he could be referring to a number of things: the immigrant experience, Western hypocrisy, and the overall plight of people who are seeking a better life for themselves. Often we hear stories of people who go to great lengths in order to prove themselves in a new country, but they're unable to be seen as equals, to gain the jobs that they're qualified for, and to have the life that they were told that they could have if they worked hard for it. The best example of this being portrayed visually is in this moment, when Bashar is pushing back against his four dancers who are obstacles in his path. There are other types of symbolism here that are specific to Bashar's heritage. Midway through the song, we start to see the colors red and green enter the scenery, and with him dressed in white and his dancers dressed in black, together they make the colors on the Palestinian flag. We also see watermelons, which have the same colors and evolved as a symbol of Palestinian identity during times times where displaying the flag was made illegal by Israel in Gaza and the West Bank. The dance we see here is called debka, which originates from the Levant region. Normally it's performed at celebrations, but lately we've been seeing it used at protests as a means of positive expression of Palestinian culture. And so they're not being discreet about his identity. They've made some very intentional decisions to show certain aspects of his culture. Whether or not those cultural nods will be too political for Eurovision is something we can talk about in the event that this gets chosen, but for now, Ruv has approved it, so it's a non-issue. Now, as we were talking about before with the discussion around this entry, there's a lot of skepticism about why it was included as an option for Iceland this year. The high position in the odds is very likely influenced by the idea that Iceland would benefit from sympathy points if they choose Bashar as their artists. And as we saw with Ukraine in 2022, we know that there will be people who jump onto that idea and insist that the music has nothing to do with it. It's all about him being Palestinian. The problem is that it creates this environment where any success that the song has or could have will be immediately rejected by that group of people. They'll never consider the song worthy of being appreciated. And ironically, that fits right into the messaging of the song. Even if you do your best and pass that test, doesn't mean people won't give you shit. That might not be what I wrote down in my notes, but I'm sticking with it. I don't care. And so, as much as all of that would be a regrettable consequence of this winning Songvakeppnin, I want to make a case for it being worthy of Eurovision because of what it's reflecting in our world. And my hope is that other people will feel similarly to how I feel when I watch the performance. Wild West as a song on its own is one that I enjoy. It's not my favorite of the year, but I think it's well produced, it's got a very slick groove to it, and it's a nice break from the louder and more in-your-face entries that make up the majority of Eurovision's lineup so far. Watching the performance, on the other hand, is a completely different story. This is easily one of the most compelling entries that we have this year because it's proving its own point simply by existing. The violence going on in the background makes it more melancholic, without a doubt, but it would have still been compelling even if we were not looking at all this in the news right now. For that reason, not only do I think this is worthy of going to Eurovision, I think this is the obvious choice for Iceland, and I hope that they agree. Obviously, there are 4 other entries that could be given the chance as well, and it's not a done deal, so let's take a look at what else is on offer. Hera Björk is fondly remembered for representing Iceland in 2010 with the song Je ne sais quoi. She's also provided backup vocals for a number of Icelandic entries and even competed in Songvakeppnin on a number of other occasions. The English version of the song that she's performing in the final is called Scared of Heights, and much like Je ne sais quoi, it has big vocals, energetic dance beats, and has this overall uplifting feel to it. Now, looking at Hera's experience is a pretty good example of this, so it probably doesn't really need to be said, but she's easily one of the best performers out of the bunch. She always delivers vocally, and she's very likable. She's amazing. The song, on the other hand, I don't think it really does anything new. These arrangements are very common for dance music, and there's nothing else in the sound that really makes it stand out on its own, other than having a little bit of a gospel sound to it with its choruses. And so I don't really think this is a very competitive choice. I can understand the excitement around wanting to send Hera again because people still love Je ne sais quoi to this day, but when looking at all the options, I just don't see this getting very far beyond being like a beloved Eurofan favorite. Another one of the dance pop songs that we have here is Downfall, although it's considerably more modern than Hera's song, and it places more of an emphasis on the instrumental and choreography rather than having big vocals. Hearing the recorded version in English, it sounds like a radio hit. It's pleasant, it's engaging, and she has a nice color to her voice that makes it interesting. The live performance has some memorable moments, like in the opening where you see the silhouettes that are doubled to make it look like there are twice as many people on stage, but the overall package, in my opinion, doesn't have much of an impact. It looks like a fairly ordinary dance pop performance. And so when looking at the lineup that we have for Eurovision, I would consider this to be a fairly middle-of-the-road entry. Maybe with a bigger and more elaborate stage show, this could be more competitive, but with how it looks right now, I just don't see many people being motivated to vote for it. it more than for other entries. The vocal performance would also need to improve because what we saw in the semifinal was pretty pitchy, and if it doesn't, then we're talking about an entry that's lacking in two key areas. Really, the best thing that it has going for it from what we can see right now is the radio airplay appeal. If they're able to do some refining, then maybe this could be a good choice, but we of course would have to see it. Vibe Song is the only one in the final that's going to be performed in Icelandic. They do have a bilingual version of it, which I guess they would be saving for Eurovision in the event that this gets chosen. One of the ways that this song stands out is that it's not dance pop like many of the other entries in the final. It's still heavily electronic and has a dance beat to it, but it's clearly trying to appeal to a different audience with its hip-hop elements and clashing aesthetics. Obviously, it's not meant to be a polished performance, considering that they're using a gorilla, a princess, and a spaceman all together. And going off of translations of the lyrics, there could be some other satire here that's not specific to just movie stars. If you're Icelandic and you can help me out here in the comments, please do. There are certain things that I can appreciate in isolation. I like how they used the audience to recreate the image of someone accepting an award, but as an entire package, I just see this as confusing and not fun enough to get into. It also wasn't performed very well, both of them were pretty pitchy, and I'm not going to discount that simply because they're not going for a refined entry. If this gets chosen, I also see it being very likely compared to some of the other entries that we already see selected that are also not super serious, and that would probably be a death sentence. So it's probably best if this stays in Songvakeppnin in the final. Sigga's entry was selected for the final as a wild card, which is one of the quirks of Songvakeppnin's system. The producers have an option to include an additional entry that was outside the top two in each semifinal, and it's something that they often do. Now, when compared to everything else, this also gets lost in the mix of dance pop songs, and it doesn't have a ton musically that makes it stand out. But one thing that I would recognize is that this is easily the biggest earworm of the bunch. And in addition to being really catchy, a lot of people who were watching who don't speak Icelandic were having a lot of fun with the idea that Goth Tilfinning sounds like Go Tiffany. The vocal performance was also one of the best. She's clearly worked on her voice quite a lot and shows it by pulling off a really impressive whistle note. Now, being the wildcard usually means that winning is unlikely. We haven't yet seen a wildcard winner from Songvakeppnin, and so it might not really be worth the speculation. But in the event that it does, I think a lot of the same things that apply to ANITA's entry about staging also apply here. It needs to be more fleshed out and more eye-catching. The only moment that stands out in my mind is the whistle note, and that's not because of how it looks. For now, this is a great way for Sigga to make herself known and ride that wave into the future. Maybe it would result in a return to the selection where she wouldn't have to be brought into the final as a wildcard. So those are our finalists. Let me know in the comments which one you think is the best choice for Iceland. Obviously, we focused a lot on Bashar in this video, and if you think that there's anything that you'd like to add or anything that I'm missing, then I'd love to know what you have to say. If you liked this video, I hope that you subscribe to the channel. I would love to keep chatting with you about Eurovision as the last few national selections come to a close. You could also consider supporting me on Buy Me a Coffee. The link is in the description. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Take care.